Good morning, everybody. I want to start off by just telling you a quick story. One of the best books that I've read here in the last couple of years was this book called Aviators. And it was a book about Charles Lindbergh and Johnny Doolittle and Eddie Rickenbacker, kind of their life story. And one of the things I remember about some of the early flying days for these three men was that weather was, I think, the most formidable obstacle kind of preventing aviation from rapid advancement. And the one thing that I never forget about that book was the statement about the dilemma of fog. Fog was the one thing that limited the ability for successful and safe flying. I'm saying all of that because last night as I flew from Seattle to Spokane, this is what the atmosphere was up to. And what you're looking at here is a weather balloon launch that traced out the temperature and dew point temperature of the atmosphere. And as we landed in Spokane, it's important to see this very near surface isothermal, possibly inverted layer in the atmosphere that just was saturated. And now the flight in, beautiful. I could see the stars. I actually saw Rainier yesterday, Mount Hood, Mount Adams. I got to see them all. And it was just amazing to see how clear the day was. But as we landed, look at this temperature inversion right here at the surface, or at least where the atmosphere is saturated. And it was kind of fun to watch this because I zoomed in here on site. Let me take you back to last night. And, we're leaving Seattle. In fact, there's Mount Rainier. And as we flew over, you could see the snow in the mountains. This is good. This is not an abundant amount of snowpack, but there is snow building here. And this was the fog layer. Can you see it right in this area? And that was the fog we landed in. And back in the day, Charles Lindbergh, don't forget, used to deliver the mail via airplane before he did all the amazing things of his career. And this would have prevented him from landing in Spokane. Wouldn't have seen anything. So we just flew right into this super thick, cloud deck sitting on the surface. And without modern instrumentation, we would never have landed. I don't know. I always find this stuff fascinating to see the fog just filling in here just before the sun sets. We were after the sunset, but definitely an interesting flight last night. Okay, bigger stories we're following, right? So last 72 hours, we've watched some very heavy rainfall move across the Gulf Coast. We've seen this cutoff low sitting and spinning off the West Coast. Outside of that, nothing really going on for the rest of the country. And the bigger concern is some of the model trends we watched this week, because when we look back at this month so far, it's been an extremely dry last couple of weeks, especially for places right here from the southwest. Most of the plains, the majority here of this side of the Missouri Basin, the Ohio Basin, and the Mississippi Basin through New England. And this also includes big sections of the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast. There's a lot of places across the country that, we think of fall as being drier, but this is now approaching like these, in this area, top 5 driest falls since 1893. So just we wanted to see if this is going to start to break. We had some early indications that we had better signals for some late season activity, late month activity. I got new updates for you on that, but I just want you to kind of sit on this statistic here and look how dry things have been. We've had multiple forecast busts this fall with predicting more rainfall coming through, and they've not verified. And so it's kind of causing us to do a lot of re-examination of what we thought this pattern was doing, and I'm just trying to continue with that story today. Outside of that, we know that the Mississippi River, which had been making a recovery, has dropped back off to about 7.5 feet below low stage right down here. A year ago, we were already making these pretty big moves, such that by the time we got fully into December and finished the month, we were back to 10 feet above low stage. And we have questions as to whether or not we're going to be able to make that jump this go around. Still have some long-range model evidence of improvement. I also have some analog support for that as well. But I'm still in this mode right now where I'm asking the atmosphere to prove it, like it's going to be able to produce these systems that could be a bit more impactful. Okay, bigger picture things. This is just a quick look. Let's just get this animating here over the last day or so of water vapor imagery. So our cutoff low is just so far offshore here. It's still bringing the moisture into California, but we had originally predicted, you go back 15 days from now, that this would be sitting over California. So it's much farther to the west, indicating a pattern that is less progressive and therefore weaker flow across much of the United States. This has been interesting to watch, is this low that continues to kind of wrap itself up down here in the Gulf of Mexico, and it's putting down a pretty high threat of flooding, especially into parts of Florida. Kind of mentioned that a little bit yesterday, but I don't think I gave it enough of my attention to see how much rain we are expecting out of that system. So we're watching some flood watch counties showing up down here, but I think there's going to be a bit more widespread as we go forward in time. Outside of that, some strong winds in Wyoming. We have some dense fog this morning down here in parts of Texas, New Mexico, also up in the Panhandle. And here's, again, the fog this morning. I can't take a picture. I'm on Pacific time, so had a 3 a.m. alarm clock go off this morning, so it's too dark to show you, but it's very dense fog right in this area. We have winter weather advisories out, too, for parts of Idaho and Montana. We'll get kind of a quick look at all of that here by going to the high-res NAM. Now, I stopped it all the way out to the end of the run because I was curious at the advancement of this front and what it was going to be doing to temperatures and if we were going to get some moisture out of this as it came through, but we better go back to the beginning and start this over. So this is this morning, early this morning. We're watching just two things, I think. We're going to see first the low continue to spin up and the possibility of some big thunderstorms and heavy rainfall throughout this whole region down here. And then the second thing is kind of the combination of the cutoff low here, the stretched out front, and what we're expecting to see this afternoon, this evening in terms of snow into this area. And we're going to see that front kind of advance as we get into the day tomorrow on Thursday. A lot of isolated chances of precipitation throughout the west. But then we get to watch that front right in through here as it curls up into a low that's sitting over the Hudson Bay. Just drop right into the Midwest and possibly squeeze a little bit of moisture out of the atmosphere, giving us some isolated showers out ahead of this front. Big temperature change coming with this one, but it's relatively short-lived until we get the big cold shot going into the week of Thanksgiving. So now that we've seen that all kind of play out, let's go ahead and have a look here at a couple of the different variables. I want to show you wind. As that front advances, I do want you to note that parts of the Midwest, upper Midwest, could get pretty gusty here, especially as you get these stronger winds coming over the Great Lakes. A lower frictional coefficient here allows the winds to really spin up and get going. So we could see gusts here 30 to 40 miles an hour over the next couple of days as that front advances. Also kind of windy down here with this low that's cut off down, really just sitting and spinning, I should say, down here in the Gulf of Mexico. So some strong downslope winds are possible as well, so just keep an eye out on that too. But if we add up all that rainfall, let's just kind of get an idea on it here, play this out. This takes us out about 60 hours, goes all the way up to midday Friday. Just note that the model is attempting to toss out here in parts of Florida, maybe in some into southern Alabama, Georgia, a lot of 1 to 5+ inches of precipitation. I'll have to fix my color bar. I didn't realize my numbers were so small here, but yeah, pretty heavy stuff. But outside of that, not a whole lot going on overall when we look across the rest of the country. So just want to make sure you see here that there is a moderate risk for excessive rainfall into Florida. So if you're down there, just take note that local flooding is highly probable here over the next 24 to 36 hours. Broader picture next week, this is from the WPC update this morning. There is some better evidence that a broader trough kind of tries to sit over the southern plains and rolls up the east coast. But outside of that, we've got a couple of large areas that are missing out on a lot of this precipitation, including much of the high plains here as you approach the Rocky Mountains. And then we could say that the precip that's coming into the west after this is lackluster as well. The story's still written in the upper levels, of course, and I want to show you the evolution of this pattern because, as you know from what we talked about last week and Monday, we saw a pretty big breakdown in one major feature, and that was the stuff that's going on over Alaska. So playing through this week, there's the trough that sweeps through and drops in a little bit of colder air through the Midwest and the frontal boundary that brings in some precip. We've watched this low just sit and spin off the west coast all week long. It's going to still be there by Friday, finally getting on shore by the time we get into early Saturday morning. But the changes in the pattern are right about here, next Sunday, Monday. So instead of giving us this nice big omega block that we expected here, we now have a high. So you can see there's the high sitting over the low, which is down here. And this is a bit stagnant in the near term, punches a a big ridge into the Pacific Northwest. That kicked this low a bit farther to the south. And so it's going to run up the east coast like this and then leave the pattern just hanging afterward. So this is next Tuesday into Wednesday. This is out to Thanksgiving. So this deep low brings with it quite a bit of colder air. And when I say it kind of leaves the pattern out there hanging, we just see a larger ridge building into this area. So when you get flow out of the northwest and it's any time other than summer, that is just convergent dry flow. And so this is now ruining those decent chances we had, into this weekend and next week for rainfall for a lot of folks, above average rainfall. Now there's a system rolling through with this trough, but it's nothing like we had originally predicted with it. And if I just take that out there to day 10 and let the pattern continue to evolve, one of the things I notice is that this is kind of a wave number 4 pattern. And we've seen this pattern before. We saw it a bit in October when things got really dry. And so don't like to see the atmosphere going back on repeat with that. I'll finish up this briefing talking about this as well. So let's go and do our multi-model comparison. Now, one thing I want to do for you real quick, I'm just going to play this whole animation fast. And I want you to just step back from your computer or your phone and just let your eyes blur and watch the consistency between both models. Let's blow that up one time and just watch. I'm really quite impressed that the models are seeing the same thing. If you watch it going forward, you can also see the same things going backward. Sometimes it's more fun to watch the weather go backward. But what I'm seeing out here, if we play through Thursday into Friday, there's our low curling up over the Hudson Bay. It's in both models. There's the front that it leaves here early in the morning, coming through parts of the Midwest. So it does spread some rainfall. And then we watch this system that was over Florida, over the south, kind of roll up the east coast but stay offshore, partially pushed offshore by the front that's advancing here. So this really limited the chances for rainfall in the southeast, and the front kind of swipes through, bringing some rain to New England. Big shot at colder air kind of coming in behind this, and then we just kind of wait. And what we're waiting for is next Sunday, when that cutoff tries to make its way over the four corners, we want to see where it ejects. And the models kind of came up with a more similar solution next Monday with a low turning out somewhere in this vicinity. Now, as I know you already know I'm going to say, the European's wetter. That just tends to be what it is. It's a wetter model overall with respect to predicting this precip. But just as a reminder, you go back 2 days and look at the forecast. This low was considerably larger, and there was another big one just barreling into the Pacific Northwest. And now both models have taken that system way up to British Columbia, thanks to the ridge that built into this area that was not in the previous forecasts. And that's all thanks to the breakdown of the big Omega block over Alaska. It was one of those things where you wake up and you see a bunch of stuff early in the week and you're making a story out of it. And the story seems to fit, your meteorological training. And then you want to take it all back, 12 hours later once you see the pattern evolve. So there is still a system in the midsection of the country next week, and it curls up into the Eastern Corn Belt here. GFS is much more suppressed on its size and strength than the European model is. And we'll look for some ensemble support here in a few moments for this. But then that low curls up into New England. Now, how much cold air is with it next Wednesday is still going to be a question to be asked and answered. You can see the GFS putting down a lot more snow, like in and around this part of Ontario and the interior parts of New England, even back into Ohio. Not the case with the European, that was the GFS I was talking about. Not the case with the European, much farther to the north, deeper trough here overall. That's why it's wetter overall. So that's out there to next Wednesday, getting into Thursday. So Thanksgiving could be something to watch, carefully, at least the day before and the day of, if you're here in parts of New England. Maybe some lake effect coming in after this. But I do want to note that both models are trying to do something out there the Friday after when all that cold air is in place with bringing some snow over the Rockies. So I normally don't show you out to 10 days with the operational runs, but got just a decent look from both of them with the next several systems that kind of roll across. What they aren't is the big ones. And if I want to cheat, I could say, oh, no, this is going to be one of my two big storm systems. This isn't a big storm system, unless this really amplifies in the forecast model. In other words, if we trend more higher amplitude in the next 5 to 7 days, then I can't really count it. So that's that. All right, let's add up some numbers here from the European model. Total precipitation, I think we can blow that up one more time. This is what we've got through the weekend into early next week. There's the low. The European tosses out in the midsection of the country. We'll stop it out here at day 7. So again, the West well underdelivered on this system that we'd hoped to bring a lot more precipitation. Heaviest rains are down here in the south, and then we got this system rolling through outside of that, got a lot of dry places. The GFS, same time frame, looks like this. So European, GFS, and I don't think, I bet you could all just draw this map mentally in your mind. That second system rolling through the midsection of the country, much wetter in the European. That's what these colors represent versus the GFS, which is wetter here. Some interesting differences also in the south. Take a look at the southeast here. Which model is kind of really dumping the rain? Well, the GFS is just flooding out parts of the Panhandle in Alabama, also parts of South Carolina, but the European is wetter across the most of Florida. So just some model differences that we have to take into consideration. Okay, from that point forward, how much snow's coming in with this? Well, there's the snow we're watching out of the frontal boundary from the low that's going to curl up with the Hudson Bay here, just the end of this week. So possibly some heavy snow right in through here, better than 4 to 6 inches. Outside of that, the Sierra Nevada not adding a whole lot. And as we work into early next week, now there's enough cold air to put some snow in the Rockies, but at this point in November, we can usually get some big snowstorms that drop into the Rockies. I mean, we haven't even had a storm system like, the famous ones, the big November ones, like the ones that hit the Great Lakes that, get written about in songs. So, Gordon Lightfoot. Anyway, sorry, my brain just kind of wandered off there for a second. But the pattern is what we need to discuss. So here's your chance at getting less than half of an inch, and it really expanded here in the northern plains and in parts of the southwest. On the wetter side of it, this is, got the new model run just came in. And if we take that back out to 10 days, there we go. This is the probability of grabbing more than an inch. And we can say that things kind of improved a bit up the East Coast, back into parts of the Tennessee Valley, the Ohio Valley. But still, these probabilities of grabbing an inch in the next 10 days are in this 50 to 70% range. And the West is the same. We just expected better flow, and it's really kind of backed off a bit. And you see much drier forecast for the West as well. So here's one of the things we just have to keep an eye on. I think right now, because we're waiting on the North Atlantic and the Arctic to kind of show what they're going to do this late fall or early winter, I think the pattern's still being best described by the PNA, the Pacific North American Oscillation. And when it bumps up positive like this just represents more western U.S. ridging. That's kind of the simple way to diagnose this. And like I said, every time you have western U.S. ridging, you get flow that comes out of the northwest into these deeper troughs. And that particular setup is just not conducive to bringing in lots of precipitation in the midsection of the country. If you're curious if you've seen this wave number 4 before, look, there's 1, 2, 3, and there's a 4 down here, and arguably extended into the Atlantic. But that's the time frame back in October that drove, flow to come around like this, which sent us into this fall drought time period. So it's more like it's been on repeat. This particular pattern keeps coming back to it, which is a bit baffling to me, given that we expected more out of the Indian Ocean dipole and the behavior of El Nino to progress this pattern along. So we just keep finding ourselves back into this pattern we saw in October. So we'd finally got the CPC to update their forecast for the week 2. Remember, they were quite wet for it, and now as we advance another day, we've seen a bit of a shift overall. I still think the European's been the best on the week 2 pattern. This is its latest forecast for precipitation anomalies, and you can see that it is a drier overall look when you get out that far. Now I'm going to come back to this idea of what's controlling this pattern in a few seconds, but first let's get a quick discussion on the temperatures. Early this morning, about 6 a.m. when I was recording this Central Time, we could see the change in temperature, so there's going to be quite a brief but significant shot of colder air coming in through here, so warm up out ahead of it, 20 to almost 30 degree drop of temperatures behind it. And our frost threat really hasn't changed too much. It's just advanced a bit farther to the south, kind of capturing some of the colder air we're expecting about a week from now. As we look at what the temperatures are up to, there's the blowtorch of a day here in the Midwest, but you're going to see these temperatures drop off about 30 degrees. Now, remember, dropping off 30 degrees is going to take it back to normal. So from Thursday into Friday, look at that temperature drop off here. That just took everything back to kind of closer to where it was. We then get into the weekend. There's Saturday and Sunday. Still a lot of mild air here. A little cooler east compared to average, but you wouldn't call this unseasonably cold. And then we get into early next week, and we're going to be watching this region to deliver some cold air as we approach Thanksgiving. The cooler conditions to the south, mostly driven by cloud cover and precipitation. All right, so here it is. Next 5 days, there it is. And we played this out today 5 through 10. And that's when we start to see this opening up to some cooler weather as we approach middle and end of next week. And then we're going to watch that stick around. So this is now the way the end of the month kind of shapes up. Now there is some evidence that we flip this once we get into November. We completely reorient to this cold west and warm east. But I'm still in kind of prove-it mode with the way that these atmospheric teleconnections are working. What are they? Well, they're the negative PMM, the negative PDO, the positive ENSO, or El Nino, the Indian Ocean dipole, and we're waiting to see how the Arctic and the Atlantic are going to kind of step in and help with this pattern as well. Globally, momentum is down a little bit right now, too, and we just have yet to see what this means for that time period. I can tell you this was actually one thing I got right. of the many things we got wrong. The Southern Oscillation Index, which is a key indice for telling you El Nino strengthening or weakening. We had predicted it dropping back down, and that westerly wind burst that's out there right now, I got a big one. So the trade winds normally go this direction, right? During an El Nino, they tend to reverse or stop or get going in the other way like this. And so we are seeing this in the near term. It's just driving that Southern Oscillation Index down. But just got to tell you, if El Nino was completely in control of this pattern, we see something entirely different to what we're seeing right now. We would see, instead of these problems with ridges showing back up in the west, we'd see the jet just loving to dip south and live south. Look at that. All of these years when we had El Nino events recently for November, December, gave us just a much more active pattern. And I don't think the models are capable of letting go of this idea, because what they continue to show is that through Christmas, again, the newest updates have that. So just imagine you have a trough here, so it drives wetter conditions here. You have a secondary push from the subtropical jet there, so we're wetter in this area, and then it exits. And we've seen this, we've seen some of this precip, but outside of it, the pattern hasn't been that El Nino-y to me, despite the fact that you could look at all the metrics we measure El Nino with and see it going. Remember, this is a drier look in parts of the Pacific Northwest simply because the trough is pretty deep in the Gulf of Alaska. So it's aiming that flow farther to the south in those El Nino years, just to show you again. So you take that trough, this one right here, and you put it here, and we wouldn't be able to stop the snow in the Northwest. But this is a flow pattern that dips it a bit farther to the south if, and that's a big if El Nino takes over. There is one key part of this, because I still think the atmosphere is being controlled by the tropics, okay? There's one key part of this that's captured my attention, and that is this. You know that for weeks we showed you these colors representing suppression in the atmosphere stacked up like this, right? And now we've got a dislodgement of the MJO. It's going this way. Now this is the sinking part of it. The rising part of it is sweeping across like this, out into the Indian Ocean possibly. And that's different. That's at least one thing that is different compared to what I've said. Hey, it looks like we're going back toward October. We're looking at, no. This is something that's a bit different. And should the MJO do what I said I didn't think it was going to do yesterday, which is to pop out over here, that gives us a whole different look at the month of December. And there's some reason to think that if it does this, we take this temperature pattern, which is cold east, warm west, and flip it for December. And then it's game on. We get what we want. We get moisture recovery. So here's something I want you to watch. If over the next few days the MJO pops out and then just dies and comes back, no. If it pops out and rolls on through, pattern changes on its way. And that's not only important for North America, it's going to be important for South America as well. All right, heat's still on. Next 5 days, still very hot across much of Brazil. We've talked about this high probability of temperatures 40 to 44 C. That's well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. But as we mentioned yesterday, there's cold air coming. And day 5 through 10, I say cold, relatively cooler air coming up from the south. Actually, up front, advancing all the way from Patagonia towards central and northern Brazil. And this is what it continues to do in the models. So let's go ahead and have a look at this. In the one area that's just been absolutely hammered with rainfall, over the next 5 days, we expect, again, another 100 to 150 millimeters of rain, just continuing to flood this region. Then we see the front advancing. See it right there? This is late this weekend and early next week, bringing in better chances for rainfall the farther into the interior of Brazil, where we've been exceptionally dry. Are these just-in-time rains, and do they last? That's what we want to know, because there has been significant potential for damage in this area given the heat and dry conditions. But you've got to remember, a soybean plant is a living organism. It has defensive mechanisms. I don't know how defensive it can be against these kind of temperatures, but should this rain actually manifest itself, which we've seen some evidence that it could, it would be, I think, critical to the success of the crop in South America. And the last thing to think about is there ensemble support for the moisture sticking around. The newest week 2 outlook from the European model continues to put down some drier conditions farther to the north and east, but it is not nearly as dry as what we are experiencing now in this area. If that MJO starts to make its move, this could be significant for changing the whole pattern, not just North but in South America. So I think we're going to keep an eye on all of it, and I'll keep reporting on it, keep you informed. So I thank you for your attention, and we'll talk again tomorrow. Thanks.